One of the highlights of the Wessex Gallery has to be our Bronze Age collections. We've got outstanding pottery, for example, these burial urns which are used in the Middle Bronze Age and have been found in barrows across South Wiltshire. We've also got impressive metalwork collections, and that's what I want to explore in more detail. So this case here has got metalwork finds from all periods of the Bronze Age. But the thing I just want to focus in on here is actually this hoard at the bottom here, which was found at Donhead St Mary back in the 19th century, actually near the clift in Donhead St Mary. And it found its way into the collections of General Pitt Rivers and his museum at Farnham down on Cranbourne Chase. But one of the objects that's most intriguing to me is this item here, this pair of items here. This is a mould. It is a bronze mould for making a socketed axe head. It dates back to between about 1200 and about 800 BC, so it's roughly about 3,000 years old. Now, to use this item will be sort of bound together like that, and there'll be a clay plug that will be inserted in there, possibly held in place, like the bar that would have gone through there, and then the molten metal, the copper, or rather the bronze, which was a mixture of copper and tin, would have been poured in the top there. And it would harden really quickly, would have then broken open the mould, and inside would have been a complete Bronze Age socketed axe. But the thing that amazes me is that this is made of metal, and it's made of the same metal that was used to cast. And you look at it and think, well, why didn't the metal bond with it? Why didn't the bronze that was poured in there bond with the mould itself? Well, the reason why is because the metal that was poured in would have cooled incredibly quickly. It hardens very quickly, bronze. And in doing that, of course, it wouldn't have stuck to the outside. This was already solid. The inside would have cooled down quickly. And of course, it also would have slightly shrunk as well. So it wouldn't have stuck at all. And in fact, we've got a copy here of what one of those axes that was cast in it would have looked like. So there you go there. It would have been a looped, socketed axe. And of course, when it's new, it would have been golden and gleaming in colour, like this plaster copy that you can see there. An object that gets overlooked in this case is this item here. This is a bracelet. It's a gold bracelet. It dates back to about 1000 BC, about 3,000 years old. Very similar age, actually, to the item we were just looking at. But it's been modified. This was originally a penannular bracelet, and it had decorated terminals, and they may have been splayed and slightly wider actually than the band that you see here now. But they were cut off. Perhaps the metal was cut off because it was recycled. But then the bracelet was kept. It was modified, so somebody drilled a hole through it there, and you can just about make out there's another hole that's been drilled through there. So what they did, and there as well, so what they did was they drilled these holes actually to put a bit of cord through so it could still be used as a bracelet, even though it had lost its decoration and part of its content, if you like. But in doing that, it distorted the band, as you can see, and turned it into a less attractive object. But obviously it still had some intrinsic value because it was made of gold. When this was found, it was found by a metal detectorist back in 2004 at Donhead St Mary. It was folded up to a small package. So it's possible that its original owner had lost it accidentally, or perhaps it was part of a hoard that had been dispersed through ploughing or something like that. But I imagine that it was a loss that was greatly regretted by its original owner, despite the fact that it had been modified. So I'm going to try and put that back now, carefully. There we go. But the gold object that everybody is drawn to in this gallery is in this case here. It's the Monkton Deverill torc and its associated power stave, this axe head that it was found with. Now these were discovered by a pair of metal detectorists back in 1990 near a Bronze Age burial mound. But back in the 90s, under the old law of treasure, when something went to an inquest to determine whether it was treasure or not, you had to prove whether the person who buried it thousands of years ago or lost it thousands of years ago intended to go back and get it. You had to prove the intent to recover. If somebody intended to recover it, then it was treasure and it belonged to the state, it belonged to the government and could go into a museum. If there was no intent to recover, for example, an accidental loss, it then went back to the finder. So back in 1990 there was an inquest and it was determined this was treasure. There was an intent to recover it. It belonged to the state. But the finders actually contested this determination. There was a second inquest, which was very unusual in those days, held actually at Salisbury Museum, when the original determination was upheld. But what I think is fascinating about this is if we think about today the context where this was found and what we understand about these objects from the Bronze Age, was there an intent to recover or not? My argument today would be there was no intent to recover. These two fantastic, treasured, precious objects, they were buried near this burial mound about 1,300 BC, just over 3,000 years ago, because it was an important monument in the landscape. It was a monument itself was probably already about 1,000 years old when these items were buried. They may have been offerings to the ancestors, offerings to the gods. Possibly they were buried with a cremation that was undiscovered when this was pulled out of the ground. So if that was the case, there would have been no intent to recover. It was placed in the ground forever, out of circulation. So it's fascinating to think that over the past 30 years, since that treasure inquest in the 1990s, I think our views of these objects have changed. But let's dig in and have a closer look. So this is the pow stave. This is an axe head. It's a solid bronze axe head. Dates back to the Middle Bronze Age, slightly earlier than the socketed axe head that we were just, or rather the mould of the socketed axe head we were just looking at. Sharp cutting edge there. It's a loop for attaching a piece of cord, and then the wooden handle would have gone in there. And of course, although it's grotty green, when it was new it would have been golden in colour and gleaming, and a very suitable companion piece to the item of jewellery which we're now going to have a look at. And this is the gold neck ring or torc, or possibly I should say a gold neck ring and torc, because what you can see is that it's a single piece of gold thread. It's been twisted to the gold thread itself, and it's been turned back on itself 3 times and then looped together to form this attachment up here. But I say possibly a torc or a neck ring because when you see it up close, my hands are quite big, but this is actually quite a small object. It may have belonged to a child, that's possible, or maybe it was an arm ring or something like that. But another possibility is that perhaps this was originally designed to be a single piece of thread, perhaps like a belt or something like that was worn around the waist, because if you unravelled it, it would actually be quite a long piece of gold. So it could have been used to fasten or secure a tunic in place around someone's waist. That's another possibility. And then it's been folded up like this, so it could be carried around, or folded up like this so it could be buried in the ground as an offering. But whatever its interpretation, there is no question this is a highly prestigious object. This is an amazing object, and whoever owned this in the past would have highly treasured it. So the fact that it was placed out of circulation, placed in the ground, perhaps placed as an offering for the reasons I mentioned earlier, is incredible, because this would have been something that somebody would have really missed when it was buried in the ground. But there's no question it's one of the finest objects in the museum's collection.